I can't claim that I always noticed them, but as the years passed, I came to appreciate the presence of circles in my life. In circles, I glimpse wholeness, holiness. As you can see in these ancient Celtic images, connecting circles with the sacred is not something I invented. Its roots go deep into the Irish blood that flows through me. I recognize how tempting it is to think of life as a straight line where one thing leads to another and everything lines up neatly. In that version of life, we can believe we are in control. But when I think of some of my life's most poignant moments, they are the rounded times, days of softened edges where I was invited into a circle in which joy and pain and connection somehow wrapped me up, and I was held. I think some of you have had those moments as well, and I hope that together we can train our spirits to better recognize them. One such circle time found me in an unlikely location, a place I hadn't meant to be, seated on the floor in a corner in the hospital room where my mother took her final breaths. For that to make sense to you, I must invite you into the circle. Let's turn the clock back to November 26, 1994. Sean and I got married when I was 29. We knew we hoped to have children, and we thought the ideal number would be between 2 kids and 4. Spoiler alert, we would end up with 3. Not knowing if we could conceive or how long that would take, we were basically open to becoming pregnant right away. As luck would have it, Shannon Noreen came into the world just about 9 months after we said, "I do." My father often remarks that she must have been conceived between the wedding and the reception. While that's not literally true, here's what we did on our way to the reception. She did not delay. Shannon came into the world in a brief and unfortunate era during which insurance companies would only cover 24 hours in the hospital for new moms and their babies. And so 22 hours after little Shanny Pop burst on the scene, we walked out of Chicago's St. Joseph Hospital and drove up Lakeshore Drive to our 2-bedroom apartment on Arthur Avenue. I come from a family of proud organizers, and organizers love straight lines. So Sean and I walked into our little home equipped with a most excellent plan. Be amazing parents. We took classes, we read books. In particular, I eagerly took classes and read books on breastfeeding. Because we're going to talk about breastfeeding for a bit, I'd like to be clear that there are myriad ways parents nourish their children. Some breastfeed, others bottle feed, most love with abandon. And there's room for us all in this messy circle. Back to newborn Shanny. Not only did I study up on breastfeeding, I bought the supplies. You may be thinking, weren't you born with the supplies? But there are actually a lot of additional, I'll call them accessories. The point is, I was ready. You know who wasn't ready? Shannon. I don't think she studied at all in utero. Sure, breastfeeding is how children have been fed since the beginning of people, but not all kids show up ready to do it. So things were getting rough. It seemed the straight line might give way, like it didn't have the strength to hold us. Here's what rough looked like. It's a hot August day. We're in our unair-conditioned second-story apartment, and our newborn is crying because she's hungry. I'm exhausted, also pretty paranoid that we're disturbing our new neighbors. Sean is doing everything right, but he's also exhausted and maybe feeling a bit helpless. And he and I both know there's a box of formula on the shelf in Shannon's closet, something we were given at one of our prenatal visits. Why did they give us that? They knew I was hoping to nurse. It's like someone handing you your favorite candy bar when you're trying to diet. Sean correctly sensed that we were veering off plan and it was time to seek help. So he snuck off to the bedroom and called my mom. In the straight line life we imagined, Mom would come as reinforcement when Sean needed to return to work. But Sean now knew we needed another plan, so he raised the white flag and asked for her help. My parents lived about 100 miles away, but it felt like Mom showed up in 20 minutes. My dad says she had her bag packed and the car idling in the driveway from the moment Shannon was born. Hope walked through the door when Mary Marcia arrived. Between her experience as a mother and her career as a nurse and nurse educator, she knew how to help. Her clinical eyes spotted a bit of emerging jaundice, and she held Shannon on our sun porch for hours, getting our newborn the vitamin D therapy she so clearly needed. And seeing me teetering under the hormonal chaos and total exhaustion that is new motherhood, she passed along advice like she was writing a prescription. Shower every day, even if you can't get to it until right before bed. And go outside every day. Under her loving guidance, Shannon and I found our way. Sean and I caught a few desperately needed naps, and generally speaking, the whole scene no longer felt like doomsday. My mother held me as I held my daughter in those early days when the happy and the sad and the overwhelming were all careening together. And in doing so, she kept us in the circle. When Mom headed back home several days later, there were casseroles in the freezer, clean dishes by the sink, and most importantly, a happy, healthy, and well-fed baby. Now let's leap forward in time nearly a year. We have our act pretty much together when life invites us back into the circle. It's the day before my 31st birthday. It's morning, and Sean has left for work already. My dad calls and tells me Mom has suffered a stroke and is in the hospital. I can't fully take in the information, so I tell him we'll come as soon as we can, maybe the weekend? I call Sean at work and tell him, and he says, with such patient tenderness, "Oh, honey, I'm coming home. We'll go now." So began 8 days holding vigil at Columbia Hospital. Shannon learned to walk in the hospital hallways, and along with her cousins Claire and Aaron brought light and laughter to those otherwise impossible days. Many others walked with us, helping us stay in the circle and not spiral into total darkness. I'll always be grateful for a nurse, a former student of Mom's, who pulled Dad aside one day and showed him the grim words on her chart. Prospects poor for a functional recovery. She ensured he encountered those words in the presence of caring. Like her, friends and neighbors showed up, entering into that from which they might rather have kept their distance. They understood you cannot work for the good of another if you aren't willing to be present in the circle of their joy and sorrow. On my sister's birthday, we learned Mom would not survive. The next morning, we gathered in her hospital room for a farewell that should have been decades away. We were devastated. Shannon, surely picking up on the anxiousness permeating the room, began to fidget and fuss. It was nearing time for her to nap, and I knew how to comfort her. So while my father and siblings stood bedside at loving attention, I slunk onto the floor in the corner and began to nurse. And in that poignant, painful moment, connected so intimately with my daughter in a way that was only possible because of how I was connected to my mom, I sensed I was part of something whole, something holy, and the circle held me. I've gotten better at recognizing these rounded times, the spaces where love and loss collide, where all that is made and the one who made it yearns to wrap us in arms of love. May you find the courage to release the straight line illusion of control and welcome the circles that are waiting to hold you, even when nothing makes sense. Thank you.